It was pretty, and there were a couple of kids at the time that signed long-term deals and stuff like that. My parents were really smart. They only put me on 1 year deal at a time because
they're offering 13-year-olds multi-year deals.
Yeah, man. There was a dude that I played with growing up. He had a 5-year deal.
Wow. Are you getting monetized? Like, were you getting handed money as a 13-year-old?
So mine was scholarship. So they paid for all my schooling, and there was a small sort of I guess a fee that wasn't money, but if I needed to go somewhere, they pay for it, or if I needed new boots, I'd keep receipts and get reimbursed, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as if they give you this much money. It was more the fact that they supported everything you did.
Yeah, you made it all the way to the highest level, and they saw you, because that's something that I put in my notes, because you see people who get recruited at a young age, and there's pressure in that. And as a 13-year-old, you're still a boy. You know what I mean? You're not even close to being fully developed.
Yeah.
But that recruitment, though, is on the premise that this kid, as a 13-year-old, we see that he can make it to the league, right?
Well, I was playing against men at 13.
Yeah.
I was playing,
Jesus.
in the.
What was your thing? What was your strength? Speed?
Yeah, I was pretty clever. I was pretty clever. And I was a small. I think playing against men at such a young age, it hurt me because one the head knocks and what we know about that, but I got protected so much with defence where they would play me in behind the line, so I wasn't copying the barrage of hits all the time.
Yeah.
Because obviously these are fully grown men and I was only a kid. So that, one, it protected me physically, but two, it hurt me developmental wise as a player, because I'd go through a season and I'd only make about 15 tackles for the entire season.
Yeah. You were 13 playing with men.
Yeah, and 13 I played my first game, and then 14 I played a consistent season.
Yeah, did you miss, like, from that age, what was the body like? I mean, had you gone through puberty at 13?
I was a kid, yeah. I was a kid, so
you weren't fully developed yet, though.
No way.
Yeah.
No way. But like I said, I was pretty clever around the field. I wasn't the world's strongest and biggest kid, but I was smart with the ball, kick into the right places, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
In my position, it's like I'm a quarterback, So
that's what I played.
Yeah, you got to be clever. You got to put the plays in. You got to know everything in advance, all that sort of stuff. So I was like that. Yeah, I'd be just pushing them around and telling them what to do, and they're kicking to the right places. Your halfback where I play is like your I guess he's the captain of the ship or the orchestra.
Yeah, would that be like Thurston played that position?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I got into NRL, like we were talking off camera 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And the first thing I noticed, and my favorite player became Johnathan Thurston because of that. I know nothing about the sport, but coming from an American football background, I was able to see his vision, like the risks that he would take in these small pockets, almost that he was tapping into his intuition. Yeah. They don't always pay off for you, but when they do, you kind of see that fearlessness.
You have a look at a lot of Aboriginal players, a lot of Aboriginal rugby league players.
He brought this up because I sat down with JT, and we didn't get to open it up. Yeah,
it's our intuition.
Let's talk about
as Aboriginal people, and you have a look at rugby league, AFL. You have a look at all Aboriginal athletes are in that space. They're just playing on their intuition all the time, and it's like a third eye.
The connection with not only the self but also the earth. I'm reading a book right now. Right when I was waiting for you to come, I was telling the receptionist, when I find new books, I'm always giving them away, and I have to rebuy them. Are you familiar with Gladwell? Malcolm Gladwell. He wrote Outliers, which I highly suggest anyone listening to this, and you if you haven't. But he has one called Blink, and it's all about that, being able to tap into our intuition, and the saying that, trust your gut.
Yeah.
There's science behind that. There's a nerve within our gut. It originates called our vagus nerve, VAGUS.
So we talk about, I talk a lot about the old people, as in my ancestors.
Yeah.
In traditional time, they didn't think with their head. That's why they didn't have problems with their mental health.
Yeah.
We live in a society today where everything's up in our head. We're thinking too much about what's going to happen in the future, and we're wasting too much energy about what happened to us. That's why we get so down, and anxiety comes from thinking so much about the future. And depression comes from thinking so much about the past. The old people, they thought and did everything with their gut. It's exactly that, the gut instinct. You know, the thing, it was simple for them. When they were hungry, they ate. When they had to go somewhere, they went. You know, when they were tired, they went to bed. We're dominated by the clock these days.
Man,
we always have to be somewhere at a certain time.
I read recently that the clock thing, like the idea that we will pay, like, you know, we're recording this interview in between two multinational banks, big bank buildings, and these rooms are filled with people who have sold their time for money, because the corporation will turn to them and say, all right, look, for 50 hours of your life a week, I'll give you X amount of money. Yeah. And more often than not, so many people, without even thinking about what that actually is, that transfer of youth, passion, creativity for a dollar sign. You know, the enemy within, defying the enemy within. Your book, is it turned into a film?
No. We've done audio book, and there's no talk of it being as a film.
Okay. Yeah, because me following you and watching your progression and evolution just on social media, and then with the book, I know it got picked up by was it HarperCollins?
Yeah, it's published by HarperCollins here in Australia, and then it's been picked up by Harper 360, which is through in America and Canada as well. So from next year,
sounds like the next step, man, is the film. Why are we stopping at the book? Book tour, then the film.
The next, so next year it'll be available all throughout the States and throughout Canada as well, which is great, because I did so much travelling throughout America, and I've got First Nation friends over in Canada as well. And the thing that I guess is so interesting and so healing and so relatable for everyone is that the content is universal. You know, it doesn't just talk about what happens to me only happens in Australia. What happens to people's mind happens everywhere, all over the world. So that's where, and it's helping people, man. I've had contact from about 6 or 7 different countries where people have said that they've got the book, you know, got it online and, you know, audio and, you know, through iBooks and that sort of stuff as well. I'm not necessarily in the physical, but that's the way we're living, you know, that's the way we're heading anyway.
And that's the power of communication. Before you came on, I did an intro, and everybody listening to this knows that I'm going to have the links for all of your contacts in the show notes, the links to where the people could find, you know, the audio version of that, and also where they follow you in your journey. But with Dan, we covered some big, I wanted the time thing. When I was growing, I grew up in Northeast Ohio, and my 2 older sisters have a big percentage of Cherokee Indian, or part of my Native American, and the time thing, as I research more and more, there's certain cultures, indigenous cultures, that don't believe in it, that don't believe in time. And as a younger dude, I learned this about 20 years ago. I'm thinking, you know, I don't know the science, but then how much of that time that we believe in equates to these illnesses and these sicknesses, and then people even wear watches. That's another one that my friends and my loved ones know, that I don't wear a watch either, and I'm like, why would I pay for sickness?
You know,
like,
it's crazy. The thing is, what we believe is that everything, and this is a lot of cultures around the world as well, is that with our culture, it's everything that's going to happen will happen when it happens.
Yeah.
So if I'm running late, or if I'm going to miss a plane, I get people say, like I tell people, oh look, I'm running late for this plane. Well, why are you freaking out? You're going to miss this plane, you know? And I'm like, well, the fact is, the story's already set. I'm just following the path. If I'm going to miss the plane, then that was set hundreds of years ago. That's the way I think of it. That's the way, you know, with our culture as well. Everything that happens, we lose a loved one.
Yeah.
Of course it's hurting. Of course it's sad. But you know what? That's that circle of life, that path. That, you know what? I don't know that this may be my last day on earth.
That's right.
Right? We just have to live in the present moment. Present moment. That's what the old people lived present in everything they did. When they were hunting, when they were looking after family, when they were caring, when they were doing ceremony, everything was about preparation in the now.
Their intention were streamlined. You can't really have a misconstrued intention on what you're doing if your focus is specifically on that moment. So many of us get lost in that.
Get lost in time.
What am I supposed to do? Or my big thing was, I was raised thinking that I was supposed to find my purpose. The word find, I did a video on this, and it really is resonating with certain people, but I was lost in my 20s because I kept looking, because I was told I needed to find it, and something clicked when I read a certain McKenna. He said, no, we're supposed to create.
Yeah.
Don't find anything. You're not going to find your purpose. We must create our purpose. With that sort of...
I believe that purpose will find you.
so that when they say the teacher appears and the student's ready.
Yeah. So for me, I now travel around the country. Been lucky enough to travel across the world, talking about mental health and mental illness and suicide. As a kid, there is no way in the world that I think that I'd ever do that, ever.
You have young kids too, right?
And I have kids now, right?
Yeah.
So there's no way in the world that I think that I'd be on this path now. Forever I thought that I'd be a rugby league player. I did that. Then
you
I thought
boxed.
that I was going to be a boxer. You know, I did that. And then now I'm on a completely different path that I believe now is my purpose.
Yeah.
You know what? And the purpose is so much greater. It's that it isn't just about suicide, or it isn't just about mental illness and mental health. It's bigger than that. It's just about helping people be the best version of themselves. You know, and people sort of sometimes go, well, I'm not sure if you may not be able to help me because I don't have suicidal thoughts, or I'm not affected. Well, I can help you be the best person that you can be. And that's, again, I don't know, but it's starting to unfold.
That's right.
So again, I'm just following that path.
Authenticity.
It's a big roller coaster. We just got to hold on. We're going to go around, up and down. You just got to hold on and see where it takes us.
I'm glad that we finally, because we were back and forth on social media for months, and when we finally locked this date, and it kind of, because I research a lot, and it allowed me to revisit some old teachers of mine. There's a guy named Jack Kornfield, who's a spiritual leader. He went to India in the 70s to learn from a very popular guru, and then he became the guru.
Yeah.
And as now he speaks, he's in his late 70s now, and he speaks a lot about depression and mental health. And a couple years ago, I used to listen hour after hour. I would get up at early, 4:45 in the morning, walk up the street to the bus, and be listening to it. And it's been a while until recently, prepping for this. And he was talking about when it comes to suicide, the person when we're listening to this, understand that the body doesn't want to die. It's not it's the mind. And then he even talks about how this flesh vehicle, he calls it, our bodies, whether we're experiencing extreme ups or extreme downs, that's not who we are. Our body is almost like
body's a vehicle.
Yeah, a vehicle with either the bad thoughts is a light shooting through it, or the good thoughts is light, and you're just experiencing it.
Yeah.
It's when you were young, because I see you put up the photos of us if you had young kids. Do you have a little boy?
I got.
Yeah, he looks just like you.
I got 3 boys and 2 girls.
There's the little guy, because there's one of the photos you put up a while ago. I think he might have face paint on, and it was like a celebration, and it made me think about your mission, because you're still young, dude. I mean, you're younger than I am. You know what I'm saying? Like you're 30, which is good. And back to the age thing, we equate things to time, which is once again our conditioned response. Yeah. But when you were his age, did the whole
all I wanted to be at that age was a rugby league player.
When did the dark thoughts start creeping in that you can remember?
Yeah, that I can remember. I think it was around about the age, and how I again equate this is going by where I was, what I was doing, what team I was playing for, sort of thing, right? So it was around about the age of 13.
13 years old.
And what I can remember it back to is on the back of concussion, and from that point on, it was just about the dialogue in my head, and then and this now has happened obviously for as long as I can remember. It's an extremely negative dialogue. So a dialogue that I could be going fantastic, and then that thought will go into or that conversation or that inner voice will start to talk to me in a negative way, where that wasn't good enough, and they'll tell you it wasn't good enough, and then you'll be looked differently upon and looked down upon, and then as you know, if I was in a coach or a team environment, the coach then will rip you off the field, or the coach will drop you from the team, that sort of stuff. So it just constantly put this doubt. Doubt then spirals into negative. So for me it was, again, as long as I can remember, I remember one of the best games I ever played in the NRL. It was a game versus West Tigers, and it was South hadn't been in the semi-finals for about 20 odd years with the Rabbitohs. When I was playing there, we come from a really sort of poor patch into a positive patch. When Russell Crowe and Peter Holmes took over the club, and There's more resource around the club. So we went from a really, really lean few years to some successful stuff. And I remember one day we needed to win this game to secure the first time we were in the semi-finals for about 20 odd years. And everything was in my head that was telling me that I was playing negative. Everything in my head, and I remember saying to
that you were playing negative,
that I wasn't in the game. I wasn't doing enough for the team.
So you were like inadequacies.
Yeah. So I went to the assistant coach at halftime. I said, I just can't get into the game. He said, mate, don't try and get into it. Just watch it. It'll come to you, and then take advantage of what comes to you. Looking back at the tape, I had one of the best games I've ever played. But there was just so much negativity in my head, convincing me that I was playing bad. I was lucky enough to get man of the match that day, scored a heap of points, set up a heap of tries, kicked a heap of goals, all that sort of stuff. And then that put us into the semi-finals for the first time in 20 odd years. I remember going home that night on a massive high, waking up the next morning convinced that I was going to be dropped from the team. Convinced that what I did yesterday wasn't good enough. Convinced that I won't get picked for this semi-final next week. It was just always this negative doubt, always just in my head.
How would you maneuver through that at the time?
Try and stay present.
Staying present. Even at the even when you were even in your 20s, you had that.
Yeah.
So did you ever? I know. So when you were playing, was it substance a big player?
Yeah. Early days.
Early days.
How
old?
I was right through. So pretty much the
when
way
did you start
I started
drinking?
as a young high school kid.
Okay, which is legal in Australia.
Well, not really. It's
18 though, isn't
18,
it? It's
18.
crazy.
But in saying that, it was 13, 14, 15, that sort of stuff, like underage drinking.
And still
parties.
performing, still playing.
Because let's not forget, I was playing with men and against men on the weekend. So I would be a school kid during the week, but then play against the men and be with men, which meant going out with men for weekend as well. The only way that I could quieten down what was going on here was just to put substance into my body. And then, I moved to Sydney and got a hell of a lot worse, a lot more rampant, and then came recreational drugs. And it was just a real spiral that I couldn't see. Looking and disconnecting myself from it over a number of years, and then coming out the other side of it. I've been sober now 13 years, almost 13
That's awesome.
years. So, looking back, then you go, and now you're more educated about it, you go, when I was well, I was present.
Yeah.
That's why boxing is such a big thing for me, because you're present when you're boxing.
Every single second, man. I coach it.
All right. So, and again, with Rugby League, I was a halfback or a quarterback, right? So I had to be right on top of the play, what we're doing, where we're going, where are their backs. So I've got to get the kick at the end of the set. So I've got to be switched on in the moment all the time. Again, it's like a quarterback thinking a couple of plays ahead.
Playing chess.
How far are we? Yeah, exactly. So that's my role and that's why someone like JT is so exceptional at what he was doing as a player, because he was present and he was the most competitive person out there.
Yeah.
So he would try to the nth degree.
Yeah, it's never just that one. It's never one variable.
No, it's never one play.
It's a bunch of different factors.
Yeah. And us as a halfback, it's never one play. Even if we get down to the other end, then we're going to try and think about where's a good place to end this set, so we're in a good place for the next set, so then we can set up for the set after. So we're always thinking ahead. But again, you look back, and it was, and the more I study it and research why I was well, is in those moments I was present. I wasn't living in my head.
Was there any protocol that you guys had for? I know recently in the last few years the NRL is starting to implement a certain in-game on-field protocol for head injuries and trauma, brain.
Not as much then.
Yeah, we had nothing.
Yeah.
I remember our coach had a saying, if I get laid out, because I played quarterback and then on the opposite side played linebacker. I was a tiny dude, and I get laid out, and the coach would come up and say, "Johnny, are you hurt? Or are you injured?" He was like, "If you're hurt, you can stay in the game. If you're injured, get off the field." I'm like, "I'm hurt. I'm staying in."
Yeah.
Time and time again, I keep looking back too about this sort of how uneducated we were about. I guess the point is, I think in 100 years, the humans who will be here are going to look back and watch how we lived with so many things. And be like, what the hell were they?
Do that?
Why were they doing that?
Yeah.
Why were they?
Yeah.
It's like how we look at the guys who used to joust on horses. with like driving the pins into each other.
100%.
It's like, why are they crashing
It's
their heads
evolution,
into each other?
It's evolution, you know. It's thinking what's more. And during that period of again, when we went from a not so great team to a better team, was the involvement of the sports science. The science behind training and science behind getting us fit. You know, instead of just running laps and getting flogged, it was more about the science of how to be fit and how to be, you know, at your optimum for the weekend.
Yeah.
And things like that.
Did you go from NRL retired to boxing, or were you doing both?
In my last season, I'd pretty much lost. I'd lost all interest. I was playing second grade.
Yeah.
So I was.
You
really
made it to the
struggling.
top.
Yeah, I was really struggling with prescription drugs.
Yep.
And I just went, you know what, this isn't the environment for me anymore.
Like painkillers?
I remember the painkillers and sleepers, but I remember the defining moment. I said to myself, and I was like, you know what? I made it. I did it. I don't have to keep trying to do it anymore. You know, I've lost all interest in the game. I'm putting myself through hell trying to get myself back to my best. I'm going to step away. You know, I step away, and that's when I went, you know what, I'm gonna have a crack at boxing. So
the narrative had yet to begin, though, in your circle of influence, or in your head, no pun intended, about the head trauma.
Yeah.
It wasn't even a thought at the time. How old were you when you put the gloves on? Not for the first time, but
26.
Was your pops a boxer?
Yeah, he boxed as an amateur.
Yeah, I've seen some stuff online.
He boxed as an amateur, and he boxed as an amateur when he got to the point where he won a few titles, regional titles, and that as an amateur, and then he won a grand final for football, and he was supposed to go down and fight for the Australian title.
He won a grand final?
Yeah, so
he played too.
My dad, he played in the NRL as well.
Wow.
So
bring him on.
Yeah.
Pops, what's up, man? I want to talk to you.
My dad, for a man who didn't go a day past year 8 at school, was the smartest guy I've ever met in my life.
That's awesome, man.
Just so much wisdom and intelligence. But I remember he was going to. They were talking about turning pro because he was undefeated as an amateur. You know, he had 12, 15 fights or something like that, were going all right, and then he got back to playing football, and he pretty much took up boxing when he was suspended from football. He had a pretty long suspension, and that's when he lost all his weight and got into the fighting, and then they won a grand final, and then the aftermath of the grand final was partying for a few days, and they didn't go back to the gym for a while. So when I came home to Dad and I said, you know, Dad, I'm walking away from footy and I think I want to box. And he said to me, it's about time.
Wow.
It was only a matter of time.
Yeah.
You know, because he knew that.
What was it that drew, because I grew up, my hometown, Youngstown that I talked about earlier, you know, Boom Boom Mancini, my hometown, my good friend I grew up with, Kelly Pavlik, was a middleweight champion of the world. Yeah. You know, Ernie Shavers is from there, you know, he fought Ali. What was it, like, boxing for me is I like the art, I like the movement, I like the space, I like the high risk kind of problem solving with the consequences. Some guys like to hurt people, some guys like to bang.
Yes.
What was it for you?
I wasn't that. You know, for people who remember me as a rugby league player, I hated the sight of my own shadow some days. You know, I wasn't an aggressive person at all. So when I went to the boxing, people was like, he's never going to make it as a boxer. You know, he's soft. But for me, it was the art form. I used to look at boxers in awe because of how fit they were, how conditioned, how disciplined they were. And then when I started doing that, and I got the boxing bug.
You were pro, right?
I was lucky enough that I went straight into the pros. Didn't have any amateur fights, and I had a guy called Johnny Lewis.
Yeah, I know Johnny Lewis is.
I had Johnny in my corner.
Just a guy, one of the greatest trainers here. I'm sure he's produced some savages, man.
Yeah.
I was impressed when I moved here to get to know the history, because I've had Mundine on the show.
You
know, Billy Dib.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Lewis, you're like mid to late 20s now.
So Johnny said to me, he goes, and I actually sparred for the first time. I did 2 rounds and couldn't hold my hands up. I was that exhausted. I sparred a guy called Gary Sinclair. Gary won IBF.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. He won. He's a African born guy, only a tiny guy, you know, and I was, you know, as a footy player, a lot bigger, and so he was, you know, and obviously doing what he wanted with me, but Johnny said, "You go right at this. Why don't you put your hand into it a bit more?" And I was like, "Yeah, righto."
Yeah.
And then I got down, and I remember the conversation with Johnny, and I said, what do you want me to fight at first? He said, just get as low as you can, without killing yourself, you know, or trying to lose too much weight. And I got down to 69 from a guy who played football at 82. I got down to 69, and then he said, I remember the conversation, he said, I'll have you at 63 in no time. I was like, wow, no way.
Yeah.
And then I had one fight at lightweight, which is 61 kilo, but fought most of my career at junior welter, which is 63 and a half.
63 and a half. So,
yeah.
I mean, and then how long did you box for?
On and off for about 5 or 6 years. Okay,
so that takes us to early 30s.
Yeah.
And you're 35 now. So my question is, and this is you know,
I miss boxing every day. I wish I could go back.
Yeah, man. So we have right before we have a heavy bag in the studio, so I use it because, you know, I played American football, baseball, basketball, but at 36, and I'm a strength coach, by the way. But my cardio about a year and a half ago, I was sparring with a buddy, and he just got back from Tiger and Muay Thai, and he beat the brakes off of me, and because my cardio, it just, and so I made a promise to myself to fill that gap, just to develop, not to fight anybody, but I don't want to have, I don't like holes, sort of thing. So yeah, I hit the heavy bag like 4 times a week just to work on that kind of sprint, sort of aerobic energy system. But back to you though, because, you know, so we started this timeline at 13. There's a lot I want to cover because I'm trying to get, the show is ungoogleable, and the subtitle is Success Secrets of Modern Day Giants. It's a play on one of my favorite quotes. If I've seen farther than you, it's not because I'm taller. I've been standing on the shoulders of giants, the Isaac Newton quote. And what you keep doing is you keep rolling and fusing into other things as you see almost that intuition we brought up earlier. Your ball career, the rugby into the boxing. Now the boxing fused pretty smoothly into, you know, would you call it, you know, the book, media, you're traveling the world. I mean, you're connecting and networking with people from all over the globe and impacting people. Why the book?
I'm evolving, man. I'm evolving.
Yeah.
You know,
what's the intention with the book?
Never ever did I think that I'd write a book. You know, when I was in America, I was touring with a guy called Kevin Hines, who was a prolific speaker right around the States. And
are you friends with Luca? Luca Lesson. Have you heard of Luca?
No.
Luca is from Australia.
Yeah.
He recently, sorry to cut you off.
Again, but
yeah,
memories.
Luca's a poet. He's a slam poet, and he won Australia's slam like years in a row. He just actually was on stage with Neil deGrasse Tyson. Or no, my bad. Dr. Cornel West. Yeah, he opened for him.
Yeah.
But you guys have I sat down with you guys have a similar kind of thing.
Yeah.
Man, you should link up with him and go tour with that guy, man. You guys kill it. So yeah, you're touring now.
I was touring in America, and I was lucky enough to do 32 states around America.
Did you do Ohio? Did you get to Ohio?
I would have, I think I did.
Yeah.
I think I did. It rings a bell.
It's a lot of states.
Yeah.
I mean, you only 32 out of 50.
So, and everywhere that I went, you know, and I don't know if you know Kevin Hines' story. Kevin survived a suicide attempt by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. So it was incredible.
No one survives that.
Less than 1% of people that survive it.
A lot do, man.
And you know, I learned so much from him as a person, as a speaker, and as a networker as well. You know, but everywhere we went with Kevin, he'd speak, I'd speak, and you know, we'd converse with the room, and then people would be lined up out the door to buy his book. And then they'd say to me, "Joe, where's your book?" And I'm like, "I don't have a book." Again, that negative talk. Why would
I can't write a book.
Why would you have a book? You know, no one's interested in your story.
Yeah.
That sort of thing, right? And they were like, man, and by this stage, I'd won, I'd won the WBF world title twice, a WBC regional belt. You know, like I'd done alright with boxing. You know, I'm not going to profess I was the world's best boxer, but boxing taught me how to live here.
Wow.
You know, it taught me how to be mentally strong. But people said, you know, if you had a book, we'd buy it because your story's interesting. And I just went, right, you know, what started off as long Facebook statuses turned into blogs, turned into a 40,000 word a manuscript in a month.
Yeah.
You know, just writing.
I did one in December. I will share insights then, because I bring on a lot of the people who listen to this show. You know, I bring on writers, and you know, being a former athlete and a coach, I've always been inspired by people who do things that I've never done.
Yeah.
And at one time, writing was that. So Robert Greene, who wrote 48 Laws of Power, he once told me that he said that never underestimate your voice.
Yeah.
You know, tell your story. And with the intention with your book and the stories and the insights, do you get kind of tell us, you know, and share the story of, if you had to do a quick synopsis, what we're going to find when we purchase your book?
I think something that's relatable. You know, there's no science in my book, and it's all.
I like that.
It's all straight from the hip. It's all about my story. It's deep. It's confronting. And you know, a lot of people that have read my book or heard my story, they come up and say, you know what, Joe, I go through the exact same. You've just normalised the conversation.
How old's your kid have to be before you give it to him?
My two oldest have read it.
They've read it. How old are they?
She was 11, my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
She's 12 now, and my boy was 13.
Awesome.
And there's things in there around, by saying there's no science in the book, a bit of a fib. You know, there's the science around addiction,
mm-hmm.
and the science around you know, genetics and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Where I said to my daughter and talked a lot about the genetics of addiction and the genetics of mental illness, and my daughter said to me, Dad, what you're saying in the book is that addictions is, you know, handed down.
Yes. Epigenetics.
Yeah.
Have you?
Yeah, a lot about epigenetics with
memories, dreams,
trauma, everything.
Yeah, behaviors.
Yeah. So my daughter said, does that mean I'm going to be an addict? Because I'm a recovering addict, right? A recovering alcoholic, a recovering drug addict. She said, does that mean I'm going to be an addict? I said, it means you've got the same genes as me. It may not mean that you're an addict, but you know what? If you don't put fuel on the fire, it's not going to affect you anyway.
Did you ever have anyone tell you that when you were her age?
No,
There's power in that.
Again,
no one knew.
So much. No one knew.
No one knew.
You know, it's the biggest drug problem in Australia is alcohol.
It's the worst drug, man.
It's legal.
It shouldn't be.
All negative in all communities, black, white, green, the male, female, everything is all centered around alcohol.
The word alcohol, the etymology of the word itself, alcohol is Latin for alkuhl, A-L-K-U-H-L, flesh-eating spirit, and it talks about like having blackout stages.
Eating spirit, where your spirit leaves the body.
It changed, dude.
I got the exact same thing.
I got goosebumps right now because I used to bartend in Las Vegas,
Yeah.
and I made a promise to myself when I moved to Sydney that I would never make another drink again for another person. So rather than working in nightclubs, I was like, let me get a job in a health club.
Yeah.
And when I read that, because we're creatures of assimilation, I knew I could find my fitness again. And you know, my own story. People listen, they know my story, but we're here for you. The alcohol thing, man. I like the tweets that you write, man.
Yeah.
You know, I like the political stance that you stand for. And I come from my hometown is, you know, it was literally when people say white and black, that was it. I didn't know any ethnicity until I moved to California, but in Ohio, in Youngstown, I didn't know what white and black was, because we all had nothing.
Yeah.
You know, it was lower socioeconomical class, so there was no rich, no poor. We were just people just trying to survive and eat. When you throw alcohol into the mix, and then when you throw in these other variables, which in America and I'm sure all across the globe, so you get single home, you know, parents, you get no leadership from the, you know, little boys are supposed to have fathers. We're supposed to learn and get things passed down to us.
And these are again, issues that affect all walks of life, all communities, but these are issues that are learned behaviours as well. So I have, you know, and everything that I do and everything in my book is based around, and this is I guess how I've getting back to your me evolving into different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, when I sat down and looked at the things that have kept me well, it comes down to 5 basic principles: living my life with love, care, respect, humility, compassion. Right? Those 5 core values that I base my entire life around. Everyone can have that, and that's how I travel around the country and helping people using my story. Is how I got well wasn't through you know, a magic pill or anything like that. It was around living with more of these in my life. So for me, I just, when I'm down or when I'm not doing too well, I got to concentrate on more on those 5 values. And that's been an involvement over time, you know, and then learning the more research behind it and the science behind those sort of things as well. So there's so much in, and again, our old people, it was all about giving.
Mm.
The old people were all about giving, looking after someone else before you look after you.
Yeah, selflessness.
Because we call it napaji, which is to always give. Because if I give to you and you give to you and you give to you, then everyone's giving to each other. If everyone's giving to each other, everyone's receiving.
Yeah, law of reciprocity.
Exactly.
Man.
Yeah, the Western-based world that we live in is all about
consume, gimme, yeah.
gimme, build my bank account so you can't touch it. So many assets, all that sort of stuff. That's why Aboriginal people across this country survive in poverty, have got nothing, but to them they've got everything.
Yeah,
there's so much that the Western world can live with that.
There's a beautiful thing, man. There's something beautiful about like how we equate happiness to. It's in so many people. If you're listening to this and you're equating happiness to an object, a car, a house, a number in your bank account, you're never going to find it because somebody's going to have more. It's not that you want to be happy and equate it to an external variable. You have to love yourself. And I think and I'm speaking from experience, I was only able to love somebody and once I learned what that actually was about self-love, not self-destruction and deprecation. Through conversations like this though, last night I put up a video letting people know I was going to talk to you, and I woke up this morning with a message from a kid I went to high school with 18 years ago, and we never even hung out. You know, we just went to high school and we're friends online. And he's very, you know, I looked at our message board back and forth on Facebook, and he messaged me maybe 3 years ago about, you know, eating right. So I sent him like something, you know, I'm always giving out, here man, you need help, message me, and everyone who listens knows that. And I don't want anything in return. I could help you there, right? He said that he's been drinking more and more, and have you heard of a word called, it comes from hedonism, but he said he suffers from ahedna, A-E, and then, you know, hedonistic behavior, excess, you know, you want everything. It's almost, you know, I'm drinking, I'm getting drunk. I'm gonna do one pill, I'm eating all the pills. So like having sex with like being a hedonism. But there's a word that I never even heard of, and he used, and I had to Google it. It's A-E-H and then hedonism. And what it is it's not being depressed, but it's having no way of being thrilled, having no happy, like
so it's empty of fulfillment.
Yeah, there's nothing. And then so I asked him, I said, where do you feel the root of this? And he says alcohol. It's when I'm drinking a lot more. And I go, well, it's never, if you go into an addiction center, a rehabilitation center, the addicts who get clean, it's not the center or the pill, like you said, that gets them clean, because it's not the drug isn't why they're there. You have to think before what got you to the drug. That pattern of, and it goes back, the unfulfillment thing. I'm really intrigued by you said that the elders and that, you know, they're forced to live in poverty because of this machine and the system built around them forces that, because, you know, so to our standards they might not have anything, but there's fulfillment and they have everything they need. How do you teach that then to a Westerner?
Okay, so
somebody who's
what we say is and this is for the people who are connected, and there's a hell of a lot of people who aren't connected to this stuff, and this is where the issues lie. It's connecting back to culture, the traditional way of life. So not hunting and gathering and going and searching for your own food and that sort of stuff and living off the land.
Not the subsistence.
No, not that. The way the old people used to look at life.
Perspective.
Yeah, perspective is culture. And again, I equate it to those 5 values, right? But when we have culture in our life, we have purpose. When we have purpose, we have fulfillment, right? So for me, that's why I talk so openly.
I like that.
That's why I talk so openly in the book. I talk so openly I did a really candid interview on SBS Live in Black.
Recently, you put it up a couple of days ago.
Yeah, where there was tears and all that sort of stuff, right? And I openly talk about how culture has given me that fulfillment, because.
Did you have to find it again?
Yeah. again, because it's been taken away from us as the First Nation people of this country. And you look at Native Americans as well, it's all been there's disconnection.
So how did, wow, that's it. So and then you're tying this into the mental health issues?
100%?
Yeah.
Yeah, disconnection. 100%.
How did you have the wherewithal, the gumption then to reconnect with the culture when you were at your darkest times?
So it just happened that way. Again, we look back at
Did you
the
have
path, you know.
a mentor?
So something was happening to me in my life at a certain part of time where I was getting visited by a hell of a lot of spirits. And I was getting shooken up in my sleep and all sorts of stuff, right? An elder came to me and he said, went through their house and, you know, have a look spiritually for things. And like an old medicine man and all that sort of stuff. And he said to me, there's a spirit in here, Joe, and he's just bugging you to go bush. He said, so it's time that you come back and connect. Because
How do you know he just wasn't BSing you?
Well, it's worked for me.
It's worked for you.
It's worked.
It's worked for you.
Yeah.
No, that's what I mean. But you only know it's worked because
time,
you trust that.
Yeah.
How
At the time, I didn't.
why were you compelled to go to do that?
Again,
Because nothing else was working, or did you just know?
I'd rather try something and it not work than not try anything at all.
There you go, man.
You know.
Yeah.
So a lot of people get scared of that. You know, they're like, "Oh, I'm not going to try that." Well, why not? If it's going to benefit you, why not try it? So I went bush, and that old man was like.
What does that mean? You went bush.
I went out and, you know, we live in cities with...
Yeah.
So bush is out in nature, you know.
Yeah, how long did you go there for?
This was just on a particular night.
Okay.
So it was on the edge of town. And he said, you stick close to this stuff, nothing will bother you anymore.
Yeah.
And if it does bother you, you'll know how to counteract it. And then we talk about rite of passage, you know, in our life. And again, this is what Aboriginal people have been disconnected from because... a completely different discussion, but culture was taken away from us and we were given the church. You know, close your eyes and pray and we'll give you a Bible, yet we'll steal your land. And that's with native cultures right throughout the world, man.
Yeah.
We were disconnected. Our people and the people who are, so you hear a lot of commentary about, Aboriginal people, all they do is steal and fight and drink alcohol and all that sort of stuff. Well, they're disconnected. They're disconnected from the true values of what the old peoples lived with that's lasted for 65,000 years.
That's right.
All right. So the longest continual culture on the planet didn't last so long because it was destructive. All right. It was because it was peaceful and beautiful.
And there's something to say about the knowledge being able to keep getting passed down without technology.
There's writing it down.
Man, so McKenna, I referenced earlier, has a book called Food of the Gods, and he's passed away since the early 90s, but it's about how we've evolved as humans, as Homo sapiens, from going from the caves to building cities. And then Europe writes about this in Sapiens. They keep bringing back to the Aboriginal Australian because not only is that knowledge still here, but so are the people.
Yeah.
Still. There's power in that.
You know, I was at just recently. I ran a wellness camp up in the Hunter Valley.
Because I'm obsessed with the origins of humanity,
Yeah.
and why aren't we learning from?
Because we've been told not to. You know, we've been told forever that the first people of this country. Here's the thing: when they first
gets
got
me
off the,
fired up a bit, man, because I never felt connected anywhere, man.
Yeah.
Like anywhere, like my hometown, I never felt like I belonged anywhere.
Yeah.
So I've always been this little kid, 7 years old at a Catholic school, raising my hand. Why do I have to pray?
Yeah.
You know, so I'm inquisitive about stuff.
So the first people who got off the boats looked at us and said, "They're less than us. We should treat them like crap. We're going to kill them if they question it. We'll do all sorts of stuff, right?" Literally, that's pretty much what happened. Long story short, and until they do what we do and we assimilate. Them into our way of life, right? Imagine they got off the boats and said, "There's thousands and thousands of years of knowledge here. If we embrace that knowledge, people would be living in a much more harmonious life now." And again, we are conditioned to not think. Even there's a lot of Aboriginal people now still that are mixed up in their different beliefs, which is fine. I'm not against that. Everyone's on their own journey, and if it's doing good for someone's life, then I'm all for it.
Mm-hmm.
But we, even non-Indigenous people in Australia, connect to Buddhism, connect to all types of other cultures and religions and faiths all over the world. Yet ours is the longest in the entire world
Yeah.
is right on your front doorstep.
Yeah, the oldest.
Don't want to connect with it.
It's
Because we've been taught not to.
It's fascinating, but that's so
We've
complex.
been told not to, you know.
Yeah. How much time you got?
I'm right.
Okay. Because I wanted you to explain this tweet to me because I shared. No, I didn't share it because I wanted to ask you about it. Now I don't get political, man, and it's out. Not even in America. That's not. I don't like it. I don't like politics. I try to avoid it. And but you tweeted maybe a week ago that somebody was appointed in Australia a position of either being in charge of.
Yeah,
and they weren't.
The ex-Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, was appointed a special envoy to Indigenous affairs. So pretty much he would come in and have not a position as the Minister of Indigenous Affairs, but he would be a part of that decision-making team, I guess. It's ludicrous.
Yeah.
This guy took like $500 million from Aboriginal.
Well, even if it wasn't him though, like even if it was somebody else.
Yeah.
Somebody else,
well, that's the way
other
it's
than
always
somebody who's Indigenous.
That's the way it's always been.
Yeah, so, wouldn't you think it would be somebody that would be Indigenous who knows the culture, or no? Or
We
no?
think so.
But then my question is, within the communities, aren't there just many different customs and cultures within so many different? Then how could you consolidate one governing body to govern the whole everybody who's left?
Because
sort of
that's
thing.
how
How does that make? Where did they come up with that?
Because non-Indigenous people are like that. And again, it goes back to the White Australia policy and the assimilation policy, is that we all have to get under this one banner.
Were these policies?
White Australia.
I'm sorry for my ignorance. I don't know much about. I've been here for 5 years.
White Australia policy.
And they call it that.
Make Australia white again.
Is that really a policy?
Yes.
Chaos,
It was a policy.
man.
It was.
What is white?
And here's again, right? Here's the thing again, and it's topical right now about the Australian national anthem. Because a young girl.
I read this.
Yeah, so
yeah,
I did the same. I did the same when I won an award in Wagga a couple of years ago, and I received all sorts of abuse and.
Did you do it? Did you kneel?
I just stayed in my seat.
You stand, and you're supposed to. What's the custom here? Because
the same as like
in America, you stand with the hand on the heart, sort of thing.
So I just there was 500 people in the room. I was just sitting in my chair. It wasn't as if I was in front of everyone doing it.
Yeah.
I stayed in my seat, didn't say a word that I have done for the last X amount of years. And then since I started learning about, again, the national anthem, and people go, well, that's disrespectful to our country, it's disrespectful to the anthem. I'm like, hang on a minute. The anthem is a 5-verse poem written about Captain Cook coming from England during a time where it was legal to steal Aboriginal kids. What's fair about that? During a time, again, of the White Australia policy.
Yeah, these are perfect examples, Joe, of how I'm a huge proponent of. I'm not a big fan of traditions.
Yeah.
I think traditions hold us back. Now, some can be good, but for them, that's an example of how a tradition is holding people back into thinking.
So a young girl. Again, there's Aboriginal people who've been doing this for decades, and a young 9-year-old girl, non-Indigenous girl, did it last week.
And she didn't stand.
Yeah, she didn't stand at her school, and the school threatened to suspend her.
You have a photo with her?
Yeah, I had a photo on social media. So I just wanted to support her and her family and let her know that we got her back.
Yeah.
So we've been in this fight for a long time. And again, I put out a tweet this morning. You probably wouldn't have seen it.
I've been in the dungeon since 5 a.m., brother.
I put it out this morning, and I was like, because all these people are saying she's been brainwashed by her parents, and all the young 9-year-old girl said was, why should I stand for an anthem? It says. Australians all let us rejoice, for we are young and free. Well, the country, Aboriginal people have been here for 65,000 years, so it's not young. And as Aboriginal people, we're the most incarcerated people on the planet, so we're not free. And we walk around with targets on our backs every day of the week. So what I did was tweet this morning, maybe the people who are calling that young Harper Nielsen is brainwashed, maybe she isn't brainwashed, maybe everyone else is. Because they're, again, assimilated into a way of thinking of 1788 when people first turned up on the boats.
Yeah,
it's conditioning. It's genetic conditioning.
Yeah, it's almost like we have amnesia too, as people. We have amnesia of how we got here, what we're doing here. Nobody likes to think ahead. It's back to the consuming thing. Me first, and then if I have anything left over, you could have it. It's
against that Western way, isn't it? Me, take.
I didn't realize it, man. Like until it took me to leave America and just be in a different country to see America from an outsider's perspective. And I've yet to frame it how I want to frame it. But the first blog I had written was called "How Pro Sports Killed My Dad," and I haven't posted it. But what it is my dad. You know, he passed away when I was 27. But I come from the gist of it is the consumerism, because I come from a pro sports town. So even me as a young boy at 7, up until I was 18, I played American football. That ended basketball. That ended baseball, year round, right? So in Cleveland, Ohio, you have the Cleveland Indians, the Cleveland Cavaliers, and the Cleveland Browns, year round, right? So the economy is dilapidated. It's an old steel town. It snowed 9 months out of the year. The average household income in my hometown is less than $22K a year. And in the 80s, it was dubbed murder capital of the world, so per capita. So you have a guy, my dad, being a representation of the whole town, my own town. You know, the football season's on. They watch, you watch 16 games, 3-hour long games, and then as you're watching this game, commercials, movies that come on, buy this, buy that, buy that. That season's over. You've just seen this for a whole season. Basketball, same thing, buy this. Years pass, and next thing you know, you're 50 years old, you've been eating shit, you've been consuming shit, you haven't been thinking, you haven't been creating, and people are dying young.
Yeah.
And unfulfilled. And mental health is a huge issue. And it's kind of like, I didn't see that until I moved here.
Yeah.
And I barely watch anything.
Yeah.
Like I'll tune in, but I don't. I wrote something like how, and then think of how many people cheer for those teams but don't support their friends and family.
Yeah.
You know, they'll buy their shirts, but if their friends or family need something, they won't answer. That sort of thing. That you said the cultural conditioning sort of thing. It's genetic
conditioning. Yeah.
It's where do you see then if we lived in a simulation, and you and I are the leaders of this simulation, and we're going to Australia 2018 right now, how do you see what's the bright side then? Like if you were able to configure it is it like altruism? Do you feel that that's even possible with the people of the land and the newcomers? How does everything conjoin and then people live harmoniously?
I think it's
got
to be one of acceptance. Again, we hear in politics and policy every week talking about closing the borders and stopping people from coming here and all that sort of stuff. You know, like as far as refugees and all that go. You know, refugees are just coming here to get a safe place to live, man. Like, we are so lucky.
We're all refugees though. Well,
100%.
Yeah, you know,
100%.
at the end of the day,
that's another conversation.
Like,
people don't think, again, because they are so genetically conditioned to think that the Aboriginal people didn't even exist.
Yeah.
Pre-colonisation. It's just so hard for them to fathom. Like
that's the
so
amnesia.
many people, so many people say to us, "You didn't even invent the wheel." Well, what the hell did we need a wheel for? You know,
that's a good answer.
We lived for 65,000 years, nourished. You know, you look at all of our old warriors. There's pictures. You know, you can Google images of traditional pictures of people in this country. And again, obviously, we didn't take the pictures. It was taken of our people when people had photography and so forth. After colonisation, obviously. But they were all long, lean, strong-looking warriors.
Yeah.
There was no fat people.
And no obesity.
No obesity.
For sure. That's another
So
thing.
again, I was one of the keynotes of the World Indigenous Suicide Prevention Conference 2 years ago. The next one's coming up in a couple of months over in Perth. But out of that conference, in talking with Native people from all over the world, high suicide rates, every Native culture, all over the world, wherever they are.
High suicide rate?
Hugely high.
Comparison
Hugely
to
high.
what's like...
Compared to non-Indigenous people.
So okay, what group... So Indigenous, non-Indigenous, the suicide rates are comparable. Now, is this over just like the last 100 years?
Indigenous people, hugely above.
Wow.
So we're taking our own lives, double and triple. There was a stat recently about Aboriginal men in Australia die 6 times more likely than non-Aboriginal men.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
And it's a personal question.
I just want to get back.
Yeah.
I want to get back to that point on that.
Yeah. Drop it.
On that conference, it wasn't mental illness that was killing our people by suicide. It was colonisation. struggling to walk in between the two worlds.
So the effects.
Effects of colonisation. Look at sugar, you look at flour, diabetes, all those sort of things, alcohol, all the introduced substance that's happening to native cultures around the world is the thing that's killing us.
Other than you see it in, I know in World War II, the Japanese, I think they Harukara, the beautiful suicide, the beautiful death. They would, in wartime, it was like the kamikazes would use the planes, but rather than putting a white flag up, they would hear.
Yeah. Okay.
But that was like glorious for them. That was their choice because it was choice. Now, suicide itself. I mean, I've heard some people try to. It's fairly new sort of thing, but
we didn't have it.
That's what I mean. So
we didn't have it 230 years ago.
So the idea of taking life, our own life, wasn't there yet. My question is to you personally. Do you feel? What's your opinion on the choice of suicide for the individual? How do you look at that?
I'll tell you from someone who's been there.
And a friend of mine, when we were 12, killed herself. She committed suicide as a 12-year-old. So I've always thought about this.
So I'll tell you perspective from someone who's been there, who tried with everything, the power of my two hands to not be here anymore.
Wow.
If I had,
how old were you?
It was recently, 2012. If I had it my way, I wouldn't be here. Something bigger than me kept me here.
Wow.
Right? So the mind. What happens with the mind? People who die by suicide, everyone says, it's a selfish act because they don't think about their family, they don't think about their loved ones. They're pushing that pain, they're pushing their pain onto others, right? Here's something from someone who's been there, right? Everything in your mind tells you you don't deserve to be here anymore. Everything in your mind tells you that you're a burden to everyone else, that you can't and shouldn't pick up the phone and tell anyone because you shouldn't give your pain to them. People say to me, when you had your suicide attempt, didn't you think of your kids? Yes, I thought of my kids, but I thought that I was best off dead. I thought that I would be a better dad to them dead. Didn't you think of your parents? Yes, I thought of my parents, but I thought they didn't love me. Because that's what the mind does. The people who die by suicide, they are in the most immense amount of physical and most amount of mental anguish and mental pain that people who die by suicide don't necessarily want to die. They just want the pain to go away. And they feel that the only way in that moment to end that pain is to end their life.
It's heartbreaking.
When people talk about people who are selfish, who take their life, man, people who go down that path with that amount of negative dialogue and traumatic pain inside their head, screaming at them to die, that isn't a weak person.
Yeah, that's why I asked you, because when I was a kid, I used to think that.
That isn't a weak person.
I now look at I look at suicide. I don't judge anybody for anything, and it's something I've worked on a lot in my life, because I can't unless we're there. You will never walk alone.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say walk. Yeah, unless you're there, whatever an individual is going through, how in the world do we feel that we could judge that? Because we equate an emotion to the outcome of how we compute it.
Yeah.
That's so selfish.
That's
selfish.
So when people who die by suicide, if everyone's saying that what they're doing is selfish, they're actually trying to better everyone else's life by not being here.
Yeah.
Because that's what their mind's convincing them. So it is the least selfish act.
Yeah.
Because they're thinking that they'd be better off. Everyone else would be better off without them.
Yeah. One of my favorite teachers says, "Every day we must protect our peace." So. Joe Williams, man, we can talk about everything. I want to. I know, man. I'm really intrigued by the time conversation, because I'm currently opening that up. That it's only been since the mid 1700s in America, and this is crazy. And guys, listening, Google this, because I didn't believe it, and then I looked into it. When the Americans of the day in the mid 1700s brought over the Chinese railroaders, slaves, to build a railroad from the East Coast to the West Coast, they would find that they weren't waking up to work. So that in that time, it was like 1742, the first time ever a man allegedly erected a clock and said, you have to wake up at that time.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of a lot of, that's when we started getting sold as slaves for the time, you know, and it's not, there's no chains anymore.
We're selling ourselves every day as slaves to the big corporate end.
Oh my
Again, you know, we're making their money. We're not making us money.
Dude, man, our duty as humans is to create culture, not consume culture.
100%.
And Joe Williams, you got a lot of stuff going on. I'm going to put your links in the show notes. We covered a lot, but maybe share with us something that maybe we didn't cover, and then where the people could find you, and then maybe any upcoming events you have coming up.
I think, you know, for me, I'm just extremely grateful that I'm alive after that suicide attempt, obviously, but pardon me, extremely grateful that I've lived a life that a lot of people dream of. And, you know, I've got 5 beautiful kids that I can hopefully help navigate them through their choices in life, you know, and just by one day at a time. Again, what I've got coming up, I don't know, because I just know that what I've got today, you know, I've got things booked in. People are going to expect me in the next couple of months. You know, I'm booked, you know, 5 or 6 months in advance. But at the end of the day, I might not wake up tomorrow. You know, Donald Trump's in power, one of the most powerful nations in the world. We could all be at war tomorrow. We don't know.
Yeah.
Right. So again, I talk and I break it down to a lot of people when we talk about depression and anxiety. There's talk that in the years 2040, the world's going to be consumed by depression and anxiety, right? Where depression and anxiety, I don't call mental illnesses. I call them thinking disorders, because we're thinking about the wrong stuff. Because anxiety and depression are heightened by our thought process. When we have depression, it's because we're thinking too much about something that's happened to us in our past, that we're struggling to get away from, that we're struggling to come to terms with, that we're struggling to accept. Anxiety is the opposite. It's thinking about too much about what might happen in the future. What if this happens? What if that happens? What am I going to do when that happens? Right? That's when the mind spirals. All right. So I tell everyone, everywhere I go, the past is gone. There's nothing you can do about it. You just got to learn from it. You know, accept it and learn from it. And as far as the future, there's no such thing as the future, because tomorrow might not even happen. This afternoon might not even happen. You know, why worry so much about what may happen when it may not happen? All right. So we just got to concentrate on living right now. You can't do anything about yesterday, but learn from it. There's no such thing as tomorrow. There's only such thing as right now. You live in the present moment and just build on who you best can be in that present moment. Then, you know what? You're doing the best version of you. And that's all that matters. Not the best version of anyone else, unless the best version that anyone else wants to see, the best version of you. And that's all that matters.
Joe Williams, man, thank you for sharing space with me. Thank you for stopping by the show. I really appreciate you, man.
Thanks, brother.
Thanks, that was awesome. Dude, thank you for your time, man.
Pleasure, man.
Yeah, and like, man, these things fly.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've done them before. But yeah, so what I'm gonna do is, I have an acupuncture at 2:30.